Hello, my name is Carol Minkidi, and my husband bought the Groliers about 15, 16 years ago, and he loved this place. He thought it was sacred, and he had visions that poetry would bring the world together. Because now we have books from all over the world. I mean, poets, it's really quite amazing. And we have a very wonderful reading tonight, so welcome. And there's people as well on Zoom, so the crowd is big. And James is our wonderful manager. We're blessed to have him. And we're blessed to have a wonderful volunteer. What would you call him?
An intern.
Huh? Intern.
Yes.
Yeah. So welcome. I'm sorry to make this a journey.
That's all right.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hello. So, welcome. And thank you for joining us for our reading this evening. And my name is Alexey, and I am an intern this summer at Grolier. And I have the pleasure of delivering this introduction for our three poets tonight. The poets will read in the order that I introduced them. And the first poet is Anthony Cappo, and he's the author of When You're Deep in a Thing, published by Four-Way Books in 2022, and the chapbook My Bedside Radio. His poems and other writings have appeared in Thrush Poetry Journal, Prelude, the Rumpus, the Boiler, and other publications. Anthony received his M.F.A. in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence College, and he grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and now lives in New York City. Most of his work can be found at anthonycappo.com. Our second poem is Leslie Harrison, and her second book, The Book of Endings, published by University of Akron Press in 2017, and she was a finalist for the National Book Award. Her first book, Displacement, published by HarperCollins in 2009, won the Bakeless Prize in Poetry from the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. Her third book, Reck, was published in March of 2023 from the University of Akron Press. And we have our third poet, Matthew Thorburn, and his new book of poems is called String, published by Louisiana State University Press in 2023. His previous books include The Grace of Distance, a finalist for the Patterson Poetry Prize, and the book-length poem Dear Almost, which won the Lascaux Prize. He is actually also from New Jersey. And one last thing is we respectfully ask you to please silence your cell phones before the readings and enjoy the reading. And I welcome Anthony Cappo.
Thank you. What a great thrill it is to be reading here. I'm 95 years old. Grolier Bookshop. And I want to thank my other readers, Matthew Thorburn, Leslie Harrison. I just read Matthew's book. It's special, and you're in for a treat. I'm going to read from my book. It's called When You're Deep in a Thing, from Four-Way Books, and kind of a coming, it's kind of a coming of age book, and has some poems about growing up, and then some more poems, more modern day poems. But the first poem I'm going to read, kind of like from the period in your life when music is a big part of your identity, like a huge part. In adolescence, I grew up with four sisters, three of whom were older, and this was in the 70s, and they were big into dancing, which meant disco, and so it was a big deal, and trying to figure out where I fit into that world. So this poem is called Saturday Night Fever. Saturday Night Fever. My mother couldn't afford to buy me a leather jacket, but my sister's cop boyfriend gave me a John Travolta haircut. His training, when someone does something to this body, I pay attention. He took me hunting, shooting a deer illegally from a moving car. I cried when they broke up. He taught me how to drink, how to slam the door when you walk in a room to show you're badass. I was a strobe, my dad gone, pulsing in the dark. Teachers said I'd changed. It's easy to be cruel with a tough guy haircut, gold rope chain. My sister's disco throbbing on the lunchroom jukebox. I'd sit with the greasers, but minutes would pass in silence, slinked away, or just waited for the bell. I always thought it was about the music, but it wasn't. This next poem I want to dedicate to my grandfather, who I recently learned he worked as a machinist and got laid off during the Great Depression, and had 2 children and a wife, and kind of had to scramble to make ends meet, and that's what this poem is about. It's called Fruit of the Vine. My grandfather sold fruits and vegetables out of a hearse. It was the Depression. He got a good deal, lots of cargo room, drove that carriage down the street, stopped at a corner to hawk his wares, watermelon on his shoulder, boxes of the reddest Jersey tomatoes, blueberries from Vineland, oranges from Florida, hustled to keep the dark shroud from descending on his family. Produce placed carefully in the hold, trunk open, curtains drawn back to reveal the goods. My grandfather's name is actually Anthony Cappo too, so he went by Tony. But, this poem is about online dating. It's called Tiny Life. Message me if you have a big life, her profile says. Well, that's great, but I'm tired of trying to live a big life. I want a tiny life, a quiet wake up and walk in the park life, not clenching my teeth in the dark life, some peace, not self-flagellation, a connection with someone would be nice life. And the book has a section of poems which are based on photographs from the Hungarian photographer Andrei Kertész, and they're very short poems. I'm going to read a couple of them, and I just took the title of the photograph. This one's called Elizabeth and I at Sunset, and it's a photograph of basically a couple. You see them from the backs. Elizabeth and I at sunset. Yes, we will huddle as the mottled sky falls, as factories sink into the river, as another winter jabs stiff fingers into the land. Your head on my shoulders, our bodies a seamless no against approaching dark. Cold wind breaches our coats, our blood rushes to meet it. And another one is called Empire State Building, New York, 1967. Empire down, reflected in sidewalk puddle. Fallen spires tip sticks the pavement like a syringe. Debris on the ground circles like biplanes. Tenements, barred windows obscure the base. Blackout, Son of Sam, still to come. Studio 54, I want to be sedated. This is the title poem called When You're Deep in a Thing. When you're deep in a thing and that thing has an anvil that sinks in your chest, and squeezes your thoughts down trapdoor corridors. When a walk in the street is a gauntlet of faces, the only song a suite of dirges, you visit the falls and think not of their beauty, but their promise to sweep you away. Lean over a railing at the Niagara River and imagine joining its rush as it tumbles toward the edge, or back in the city, drive over a bridge, see a pedestrian walkway and wonder if there's a ledge below to stop a leap, and you hope for future reference. There isn't. When you're deep in a thing, it's good to have people who love you, faces in your heart you wouldn't want to see shattered. This poem is called Bodies. That we exist in bodies is ridiculous. Not the bodies themselves, lattice, torque, lace, but how soft they are, how everything can go in a second. Ambulation leads to ambulance, vehicles to ventilator, hard candy to coffin. Rocked back with shock, laid up for a week or 8. The cosmic vacuum is always on and looking for more specks to lift into oblivion. When my sister was born, everyone said, watch out for the soft spot on her head. Even then, I thought that was crazy. Why would a baby come so gelled, so open? Everything about her made me nervous. Every cry, bump, fall was going to be the end. Fresh torrent of tears, family shred at the seams. And now my own body, not the given it once seemed. New medications, dehydration, routine middle of the night pee, now fraught. Once a body's set in motion downwards, there's no telling where gravity will deposit it. Gashes, stitches, displacements, if you're lucky. And what's the meaning? What's the deep meaning of body fragility? Transience of all things, supremacy of soul, need for pleasure to counter pain. I'm not wise enough to say, but when my lover rubs my feet and relief immediate, when she caresses my back and gives an unexpected kiss, when we're entwined and our bodies seamless, all sublime and far from ridiculous. This dissociative orphan, my body, now portal to, yes, pleasure, but also presence, safe to exit the head, open senses. Maybe this is a poem about love, not the body, but how to separate. A body can glide the path to love, and love can tether a body to the world. And now, though my wish is to bound out of bed at night, I don't. I do what the doctor says. Sit at the ledge a couple seconds. Stand up, but don't walk right away. Get my bearings. Hold on to things. Yeah, thank you very much. Here's another poem about identity. That's the theme for the night. And this was after I had seen one too many commercials late at night saying that they're going to protect your identity from identity theft. And the poem is called Identity Theft. And just in the last line, I used the words can fuse, as in put together, as opposed to confuse. It's when you're reading it, it's hard to get that sense. So the poem is called Identity Theft. The TV ad promises they'll notify me immediately as soon as they detect a threat to my identity. A great relief because I'm concerned lately. Feel it elongate, detach, an amoeba splitting during mitosis. but those fears are all yesterday. They'll text, send an electric buzz through my system the minute I start to fissure. Then, like seeing horses sprint to high ground before a tsunami, I'll be warned and confuse myself together. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, people in person, old friends and new friends, and on Zoom. It's really great. It's really great to see. So I think I'm going to read two more poems. And this one, I don't think I've ever read this one before, but I'm in Boston-ish, and this poem is called Independence Day. And this, I was never a professional wrestling fan when I was growing up, but it mentions one of the characters of one of the professional wrestlers back in the 70s when Andre the Giant roamed the land. He was one of the big ones, but this is a different one. The poem's called Independence Day. Descartes thought the pineal gland the principal seat of the soul, and if true, Joe's soul exploded when the third bullet hit its mark. Was Victor suffering from dementia, some buildup of brain sand when he fired the shots? No, Victor did not have dementia or any other brain funk. He was drunk, true, an old punk in full-on mess mode. He ached for Anna, who was through with him. A violent fuck of a man, she said. He toddled into the theater, Glock held high, and demanded three things: a gold watch, canary, and a plane to Cuba. Waving his gun, he said, "Express train to the coroner right here." Vic shot up the screen while reciting his screed against modernity. Joe flashed back to childhood memories of Chief J. Strongbow applying his sleeper hold and lunged in Vic's way. Without delay, Vic fired and Joe joined the legions of dead 21st century heroes. They named the theater after him. The mayor declared a day in his honor, and his wife got a framed proclamation. They all talked about what a beautiful soul Joe had. Plane to Cuba. Remember back in the 70s, whenever it was hijacking, it was like they're going to Cuba. I guess that was when they got they had protection there. So the last poem I'm going to read is a poem about gardening. And once again, I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Grolier. This is great. This place is like it's got to come here. It's an amazing temple to poetry. It's gorgeous. Gardening. I believe my mom is on Zoom, and she's a big gardener. She loves to garden. I do not like to garden. I don't like to get down in the dirt. I don't like bugs, but she does, and this is for her. And the poem is called Pillbug. On my knees, I roused weeds from their dug-in nests. Roots screech reluctant goodbyes and carry a tiny armadillo creature yanked from Earth's core. Slumber interrupted, he wipes his eyes, scrambles to the surface, crawls on my hand, threatens a jag up my arm. But really, just scared. World upended, so much done, undone. So many steps to retrace. Collapses his body in a clenched shut case, like any pillbug or person would do. Thanks for listening. Thank you so much.
I'm going to take my mask off and trust that we're going to be okay with that. Hi, thank you for coming. Thank you to the Grolier for hosting us. My name is Leslie Harrison. I'm going to be reading 5 poems from my new book, Reck. Reck is a fairly archaic word. It means 2 things at the same time. It means to pay attention and to be alarmed by. And this is a book of both paying attention and being alarmed. And the title, by the way, shout out to Jennifer Clarvo, who is here tonight, who titled the book for me, one of my dear friends and trusted readers. She's the one who first suggested Reck. The first poem is called Charm Against Sorrow. And I'm going to have to take my glasses off because they suck and I can't read with them on. So, sorry. Charm Against Sorrow. Someone perched bird-like, knees drawn to chin, feet on a fat branch, back curved like a broken arch. Someone was huddled on a dead tree, on a tree like old bone over water. Someone could find nothing at all to praise in the cage of skin, nothing in the cage of afternoon. Someone ached and was empty, the way the beaten sky might sometimes be just like a bruise. The way storms leave everything behind to heal itself again, to make itself into something other than a case study for the wind. And for the rain. The rain falls from a height so great that nothing survives the distance. The distance here cannot even be measured. Someone was watching the rain, was trying so hard to solve for sorrow. Someone thought she might be sorrow's solitary bird, but someone was instead the whole damned flock, thick and coming constantly apart. And in the rain, her nascent, her myriad wings grew too heavy to fly. Her wet feathers became just another argument she had already, or was always, just about to lose. So this poem, this book tends to mash up a lot of different things. And one of the things is a series of documents called the Bills of Mortality. They are statistics kept in London during and after the plague years. And they list cause of death and the parish in which the person died. And of course, we're talking the 15 and 1600s. So the causes of death are sometimes fairly peculiar. This poem mashes up the Bills of Mortality and the title of it, Parable of the Elephant, and in parentheses 1692. 1692 is the year from which I drew the statistics. This poem also arose from my obsession with shipwrecks and also from an unanswerable, it turns out, question, which is, when did the first elephant come to America? We don't know. Parable of the Elephant, 1692. And the first elephant came to America on a ship called America, and nothing but wind pushing her on and accompanied by guns. And later, America struck a whale off Portsmouth and returned to port. And people pay to see strangeness, pay for danger. And she was a 2-year-old girl. Some migrants are welcome. And the whale's fate is unknown. And that America rotted in the dock, stripped of her metals, and became bullets for future wars. And we are a murderous race and fragile. And another America struck a reef, and maybe the elephant was named Old Bet. And large must equal old, gray must equal old, and maybe Old Bet was the second elephant in America. And foreigners are so hard to tell apart. And one America foundered from the Latin, meaning send to the bottom. And one was filled with stones and deliberately sunk, and that is also foundered. And history lost or added an elephant. And one or both were filled with bullets and deliberately sunk. And 77 from evil. And another America struck a reef, and 43 from drowned. And Mary's keeper struck her, and Mary killed her keeper. And 1,288 from toothache. And they lynched Mary, and 18 from executed, and another America rammed the dock, and 19 from murder, and 400 by elephant in the land of elephants, and 100 elephants by citizen, and these are not good numbers. And one America was expended as a target, and one ran aground, and one struck ice, one struck another reef, and scatter the bones, and water them with our tears, and watch nothing grow here in the last America. I was feeling some type of way when I was writing this book. I grew up in coastal New Hampshire, and I lived for many years in the Berkshires. This is the first time I've been back in 12 years. It was so delightful to hit the Massachusetts line. I felt like I was coming home. This next poem is called Voyager Parable, and it references the Voyager spacecraft, the one that carries the golden record and is way, way, way deep out in space right now. And I was doing research on the Voyager and discovered that a lighthouse I had spent my childhood looking at and playing around at is on the golden record. And that seemed so incredibly strange to me. The lighthouse is the Nubble Light in York, Maine. So anyway, this is Voyager Parable. Today, I am downhearted, meaning sunken, meaning mired. Come and be with me in the places just vacated by the predators. First stillness, then the rustle of applause, for the incandescent light of survival, for the mighty who hunger but do not dwell, for the timid in their stillness. Even sound waves are a kind of migration. How somewhere out there so deep in the sky we can't find it, something is singing a song full of static, ecstatic with our survival. Somewhere closer by, a cicada is crawling out of itself. It will grow wings and it will die. On the record, a tree covered in snow. Even trees begin their lives as a journey, first a fall, then a breaking. On the record, violence implied by an ancient wall. On the record, my childhood lighthouse. Not one shipwreck, weapon, predator, not one war. If the record migrates in only one direction, we are frail craft. We are small fry born into mystery. We sleep in our skin, waiting to be woken with touch. On the record, a baby cries and someone sings, and the crickets go on chirping, and nothing ever dies. This next one is called Hibernacula Parable. It's another mashup, this time of other strange facts. I clearly like Google way too much than is probably healthy for me. I was biking. I live now in Maryland, and I was biking in the spring, and the spring peepers were out, and they were cacophonous. They were so incredibly loud, and they're tiny little frogs. And I wondered how frogs survive the winter, because this was very early spring. And a hibernacula is any place that any creature survives the winter, including all of our houses, I think. And I came across this fact that frogs survive the winter in very shallow hibernacula, and they do so because they have a specific kind of glucose in their blood, and that prevents their blood from forming ice shards. Ice shards would shred their bodies, but their blood prevents that from happening. And so they survive the winter almost entirely frozen solid. And the other thing that this mashes up is snow globes. I think every poet on earth might have a snow globe poem. This is mine. Hibernacula Parable. And everything increases, the wars, the numbers, the cities, and doors admit people into houses, and gates exclude people from the lands. And we make snow globes, those perfect lives under glass. And we imagine skates gliding happily forever across thin ice. And the lights are always on, always golden, and beacons steady in their welcome. And the ice never breaks, and nobody goes under. And the fish see etchings in their sky, contrails carved by shadows and blades. And there are no guns, no roaring silver birds, no towers. And even violence causes only weather. And the next storm coats the town with glitter and prism. And even a toy is a lesson in secrets. And the fish are an uncertainty experiment. And deep in the pond, we pretend a shipwreck. And the fish are all called Heisenberg. And the people are made unknowable, made entirely of secrets and the absence of touch. And somewhere in the scene, a frog has frozen solid, and glucose prevents ice from breaking his heart. And his voice in the spring will be mighty, and spring will never come to the globe, and the one gesture of a tree, and the bare branch, the bird endlessly perching. And nobody has to stop skating and put away the skates and leave the beautiful snow and go through a doorway and into another world. And the people glide between the golden lights and the golden fish and live in sudden storms of shining snow, and they're cradled in distant, unreachable hands and pierced by ice and saved by sweetness. I should say a lot of these poems have a lot of ampersands in them, so I'm sure you're hearing them. This is the last one. It's called Parable of the Spring. I teach, and I've been joking with my students that I've been trying to write a happy poem for 20 years. I'm 0 for several thousand. This is as close as I have come, which is why I like to read it. Parable of the Spring. And what if spring meant leaves rising into the air and brushing off the stiff, brittle skin of winter and greening again? And the trees taking back their own disasters, and the ocean floating every miracle wreck back into the air? And what if spring meant battalions of crows rising like helicopters and circling once and moving into the green distances, and their wings panting like dogs? And before they rose, the crows searched the lawn, for the bodies of the bees and made of their beaks a cradle and rockabye baby. And in this way, the hive again took flight and into the treetops. And only the trees knew how to breathe, and the boats tinkled with glass, ice, and laughter, and sailed gaily along, and when the wind blows, and the sakura petals sang pink into the mornings, and the bees in their keratin nests and their 5 aortic arches began again to hum, and the cradle will rock, and nothing but the rain ever fell, and everything healed instead of endlessly starting over.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matthew Thorburn. It's great to be here. Thank you so much to James and to everybody at the Grolier for having us, for welcoming us here. This is, like Anthony was saying, it's like hallowed ground for poets and for poetry. I also want to thank Leslie and Anthony for making the trip up here to read together. Of course, I'm excited to read my poems to you, but I was really excited to hear them read 2 friends whose work I love. So thank you both so much. I'm going to read some poems from my new book, String. It's a book-length sequence of poems. It's sort of like a novel in poems. And String tells the story of a teenage boy's experiences in a time of war and its aftermath. It's a work of fiction. His name is David, and the poems are all written in his voice. And over the course of the story, he loses pretty much everyone and everything, but he survives to tell his story. And so this book is sort of him looking back on his experiences and trying to make some sense of what happened to him and to sort of untangle the string of his memories and his feelings and thoughts. I'm going to start with the first poem in the book. Also, I'll just say a number of these have a title that leads right into the poem. This is called Once. Once there was crusty bread, a last half loaf, a rind of cheese. My parents danced in the empty kitchen. They knew we would never come back. They didn't know I listened in the dark. Brush and scuff of shoes, guttering candle. There was no moon. There was a broken oak, a silvery rain pooling in the grass. Once in the tall grass, there was a tanned captain, chest smooth, pants unbuttoned. His holster amazed him by being empty. Rosie groaned, spat, clutched her wrinkled pink dress, pointed the pistol between his eyes. Between the trees, I saw how everyone dies. But once I was a boy who talked in circles. I walked in the woods. There was nowhere I wouldn't follow her. Like a novel, these poems, there's a whole sort of cast of characters in the story. David is the speaker of the poems. Rosie, who you just heard about, is a young woman who he's fallen in love with just before these soldiers invade their town. Then there's his father and mother and some other people from the town, his neighbors and some other relatives. So this poem talks about his father and mother too. Pipistrello, father called you, in the old tongue used only with mother, which suits your jaunty dart and stitch, your glide and swoop, much better than our flat, no-nonsense bat. You sew up the night, you sew up the night, out and over trees, the pond, the field. You gather loose ends, you loop around again, zip and stir, swerve, strike, pluck bugs from air. You fly by ear, I remember the teacher taught us. I remember the teacher one night hanged upside down in a tree. Can I say you see with your ears our mostly fuzzed wings, then vanish as I would have, except I had none and nowhere to go. Now it's dusk and you one shade lighter than dusk. Oh bobbin, oh Philip of fear, flying up, away, like the tailor's needle, a silver sweep and flash. You at home here in the dark, where we groped, we worried, we wished for light. This poem is about the soldiers that come to their town. It's called They. They like to throw things. A man down a well, a woman through a window. They like to know things, names and dates, your hopes, what hurt, my hiding place, the combination to Saltzman's empty safe. They like to break things, doors, bicycles, legs and backs and necks. They like to take things, money, gold rings, fingernails and fathers. They had no need for her, none for me, except they were hungry, so hungry and so angry, like shadows. They liked to hide behind my back. They liked to ride behind my eyelids. Death was their dark horse. They never stood still. This is one of the things about this book is I was trying to imagine this story, and it sort of started with this character's voice and sort of imagining this experience, and then thinking about the other people that would be in this story and what would happen, and what life might be like. This is nothing I lived through, but just imagining it. And so one of the things that happened in the story as I was writing it, and that seemed true to life, is that although there's this invasion, this war going on, that this character is he's a teenage boy and he's fallen in love, and that's something that happens, I guess, no matter what else is going on in the world. And so this poem talks a little bit about that in the midst of everything else. It's called The Magician. The white rabbit popping out of a hat I loved best, so plump, its sleepy stillness. And the bright rings that were linked, then not, then clinked together again. Like Rosie's hand, like mine, held tight, then let go, the colored scarves. Red after blue after green, a wave, a rope, like magic, the way they made me forget. The bomb-splintered tree out back, its branches scattered in a halo. There was time for one last trick. The turbaned magician, his skinny assistant in a sparkly mask. Smile, a finger snap, and poof. They made themselves vanish, him and her, both at once. No one left to say, ta-da. I squeezed Rosie's hand, heard her mother cough. In that darkness, I thought of grandfather, deaf in one ear. His left hand, mother would say, just didn't work anymore, too tired. I thought of his heavy walking stick, the newspaper folded on his chair. How it did not disappear for a year. It was the day he died. This is called Pale Stars. I saw Rosie suddenly after looking a long time into purple irises, untouched beside the burnt wreck. The blackened plane took off half her house. My knees ached from crouching low. Last ribbons of smoke, acrid stink in my throat. Days I dreamed green fingers in the dirt. No one said, stop growing. No one said, hold your breath. But then I saw her, hair, her dress just darker than irises, a bare shoulder. She hunched purple and the purple gray, caught the same fading light in worried folds. At first I could not see her, could have stared hand to brow, and never seen. But then the bells of her sleeves, her hands, white stars cut out. Everything else was dirt, was broken, buried. I looked longer, lower, long pale thighs, a smear of blood, a handprint bruised dark. She crouched in flowers, a spreading shadow on the torn up ground. I couldn't stop looking. She turned, she saw me. Run, Rosie mouthed, run. That's the end of the first part of the book. And after that, Rosie sort of disappears and David spends quite a time trying to find her and worrying about what happened to her. And so this poem starts the next section where he's looking for her. It's called Which Way Now? I thought I saw you stepping into the street, heard you tapping at the window, whispering my name. Once you pinched my elbow in the tall grass, your hair hanging over my face, almost kissing me, then kissing me. There when I wanted you, which was sitting on a speckled rock by the cold river, your hands hiding scraped knees. Walking the muddy road, you gulped from my canteen, a thread of water silvering your long neck. Once in Schmidt's field, we crouched between rows of green, your finger to my lips. A soldier ran past. I stared at the dirt on your toes, tasted dirt on your finger. Once you slipped into the shadow between two trees. Once the amber light falling in the river. So I looked in its broken mirrors, its galloping horses. I wandered the woods, calling Rosie, Rosie in the fields, the barn. I waited. I wondered when would you be back? I searched the shuttered post office, torn letters under my feet. Under the stars, I called until I thought I heard, you asking where could we ever be safe? I'm going to read just a couple more poems from the end of the book. There's a lot that happens. David's family tries to leave the town. They get separated, and he ends up wandering on his own and trying to find a way out. This next poem was inspired by a painting by Gerhard Richter called Stag, and it's if you haven't seen it, it's a painting of a stag, a deer, and it's in a very dense woods, and all of the trees are very sharply outlined and very dense and tangled, and then the deer is this sort of gray blur, and is turning to look out towards the viewer. And it's something I saw a long time ago at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and always wanted to write about and just sort of had in my mind. And then when I was working on this book, that seemed like an image that had something to do with this boy. And so this is called The Stag. I couldn't see a way out for him. The woods too tangled. Those arrowing branches pinned him in. One broad trunk weighed him down. No break in sight. No light shafting through. And what did you do? I lay still among the bodies. And how did you live? I played dead as the dead grew cold all night. And why didn't you scream? I did scream, down in the dark. I kept it locked behind my teeth. And why did you close your eyes? So I could see the stag instead, his head turned to me. I watched until he blurred away into pale gray light. And why tell us this? Because I've grown old. Because my punishment for living is to keep living. And as David's trying to make sense of his experiences, one of the things that he sort of wishes for is that he could sort of reverse time and go back to before all of this happened. So these last two poems are first him sort of imagining that, and then the very last poem is right before everything starts. So I want to say thank you again to everyone here in person and everybody online. And I'm going to read these last two poems for you from String. Until you never. Backwards, I would tell it. So the soldiers borrow the rope from Jean's neck to hang the church bell. So rocks fly from windows, and sparkly bits rise into frames. So flames turn into Schmidt's barn. A crackling torch, a glass bottle, drop into a soldier's hands. I would tell it backwards, so the bleeding sheep go quiet. The lightning-cracked sky lightens in the west. The sheep wander backwards out of the barn. Soldiers climb back into their trucks, their tanks, roll slowly out of sight. Rifles suck up each bullet as they go. So mother will appear here beside me again. I'll drift awake again. She strokes my hair, her warm hand. My sweet boy, a dream, she says, a dream. You must wake up now. It's time to turn on the light. Time to get dressed, eat dinner, grow smaller until you never have to live through this. And this is the last poem of the book. It's called A Girl Was Singing. This is about Rosie. Once a dog ran into the road, and a girl hurried after it, calling, Roger, Roger, as the mechanic struck a match on his boot sole. The butcher wiped his hands on his apron stained pink. Once in the field outside town, birds chattered, and then a gun cracked, then silence, then the birds chattering again. Faint, but once a little string of notes. Even this shy boy heard it. He let the sheet music drift to the floor, set down his violin, leaned out the window. Yes, a girl was singing below, and his lips parted too. I mean mine. It was me, though I didn't know the words, didn't know her name. What would happen once I did? It was the first day of May. A train clattered by. Not far away, soldiers were coming. Thank you very much.
All right, just want to say thank you to our poets tonight. Thank you, Anthony, Leslie, and Matthew for sharing your wonderful work with us. And let's give the poets another round of applause for a great reading. Thank you for joining us. And we have the poets' books for sale, and the poets will be signing their books right over here. And one last thing is we ask you to please put your chairs up against one of the walls, either that wall or this wall. And thank you again for coming. Yep.
Guys, thank you.